Hey guys, Stockaholics, thank you guys for being here today. Figured it's time to make an update on A2 Milk. In this video, I'm going to be talking about some news, some things that have been happening in the company. I also wanted to address a misconception on, I think, the science of A2 Milk itself. So I'll briefly talk about that and share a video where people who are curious about the science behind that can go and check it out. I'm going to also be asking Australians for feedback. I'm an international investor, and I know a lot of the people that watch my videos are as well. So, and I know that a lot of the people who watch the videos for A2 Milk are Australians. So if you're from Australia and you can give us some insights onto what the heck's going on down under, we would greatly appreciate that. And I'll be providing some closing thoughts on what I'm doing with the company and how things have been going so far for me. I'd also like to mention, if a lot of the stuff I'm talking about in this video doesn't make sense, or you'd like to know more about some of the things I've talking about in this video, I've made several videos over the past couple months talking about A2 Milk. Although the videos are a few months old, I still think 99% of the content that I've made in those videos are probably still materially relevant as of the creation of this video today. So if some of the stuff I'm talking about in this video doesn't make sense today, in the interest of being non-repetitive, please go and check those ones out. I'll make a playlist. So if you're interested in some of those, some more information about this company, please go and check those out. All right, I wanted to start by sharing this article by Daniel Broren of Watermark Funds. He is long in this position, so make of that what you will. And this title of this article is "Sour Milk Now Tasting Sweeter." I think this conveys some of the change in sentiment that we've seen in this company, whether that is for the sentiment shifting because the share price has begun to go up, or the share price is a result of that, is anybody's guess, right? Did the chicken lay the egg, or did the egg lay, whatever, that thing, right? All right, so here we go. I'm going to provide some color as we go through this article and expand on some of these ideas to the best of my ability. The A2 Milk share price has seen one-way traffic since its full year result in August last year, down 75% before basing out in May. Whether that the uptrend that we've seen now will continue is anybody's guess, or whether this downtrend will continue is anybody's guess. Whenever we see a great brand cop a hiding like this, it's a strange use of words right here as an American, we get excited as long as we don't own it. Successful brands are difficult and expensive to build, but most importantly, tend to have enduring value. And that's part of what attracted me to this company. I thought that this is most likely an extrinsic event causing the share price to plummet as it has. There can be many reasons for a brand's near-term profit to fall, but the key is to determine whether these issues are permanent or transient. In this way, we aim to identify the reasons for A2M's share price collapse and make some judgment on whether it's time to buy. Supply, a big part of the problem. A2M experienced volatile demand in 2020 because of COVID-19. Firstly, demand spiked as Chinese consumers panicked and filled their pantries. Later, as pandemic concerns eased, consumers started to work through their personal inventories and demand quickly eased. In the United States, when the pandemic first hit, one of the things people went nuts over was toilet paper. I don't know why. In retrospect, it makes absolutely no sense, right? But if you think about this, right? If people go to the grocery store or wherever, Costco, and they buy a shitload of toilet paper, right? And they buy it, and let's say that their normal spending habit, they're going to go out and they'll buy, you know, a dozen rolls every month or so of toilet paper. If you go out and you buy 100 toilet paper rolls, or you buy several hundred toilet paper rolls, you're going to have to, it's going to be some time for you to use all of that toilet paper before you go out and you purchase more, right? I think the same thing is true for what has happened with A2 milk. In the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of people panicked in China or wherever they're purchasing, especially the infant formula version of this product. They're like, okay, I need to secure this infant formula to make sure my baby's got food, right? We don't know when the next time this stuff, there's a lot of heightened concerns about whether this would be available, right? So a lot of people purchased infant formula to probably stock up and hold for to use at a later date, right? But what that means is once certainty was restored, people still own this formula. So instead of going out and purchasing it on a regular basis, they already owned a lot of the infant formula. So they didn't need to go out and purchase more. So that led to a dramatic amount of sales all at once and then diminished sales over time. But what we saw with the A2 Milk Company and the management and the misunderstanding perhaps of how the Daigao channel worked and all of these things, they kept pumping out supply. They assumed that these amount of sales were going to continue. Maybe because they had seen such dramatic growth over the last, I don't know, 5-10 years with this company. Perhaps they thought, okay, this is just more of the same. We're growing rapidly, when that wasn't really the case. They failed to understand what was actually happening. They were failing to understand that this was a short-term COVID-induced demand, and they ramped up supply. So they put an oversupply of infant formula into the market, right? This sort of volatility can be difficult to manage, but nonetheless, we think A2M did a poor job of it. And I would agree. And I think a lot of people would, right? That's why we saw a lot of people who were very discontent with the management, right? A2M management, now gone from the business, did not adjust supply to match slowing demand signals from its usual trusted wholesale customers. Instead, it pushed excess supply into new channels and customers that were not properly developed. The result was a market that was saturated with inventory, a large amount held by parties that A2M did not know and ultimately could not trust. These parties attempted to clear the inventory in discount channels, thereby reducing the profitability for A2M's trusted partners. The ultimate effect of this channel loading saw A2M's FY20 revenue overstate the true demand. Coming down the other side of the mountain, FY21 revenue has been notably smaller and the cause of the share price collapse. Now, we have the incoming CEO, David Bordelesi, hopefully said his name right, has purposely held back sales to allow excess inventory to clear and channel economics to recover. One of the things we've noticed with the company, a lot of the supply that was given out to the market was starting to get dated. It was starting to get old. So they gave an exchange. They took back some of this dated infant formula, and they gave out a replacement product with a further shelf life. Our industry sources suggest that A2M elected not to participate in recent key selling events on Chinese e-commercial platforms. As such, FY21 revenue is likely a poor indicator of the true sales base and underrepresents real demand for the brand. A key point of optimism and an essential factor for investment in A2M is the following price chart for A2 Platinum infant formula. This price recovery tells us that the oversupply may be nearing resolution. As such, FY 2022 revenue is more likely to reflect true demand. So what we saw with the oversaturation, the oversupply of the infant formula in the corporate Daigao market is that we saw pricing diminish because there was such an oversupply of this stuff. The prices came down, and that was, if that had continued, likely to be damaging to the pricing power that the premium quality that A2M has. With that supply diminished and with that inventory being replaced with further dated out inventory, we start to see price recovering. So this tells us two things. First of all, that supply is in that channel has decreased, thus increasing prices, and hopefully that there is some significant demand for this product, which we will see in a second. in demand. Demand appears to be holding up better than some might think. Underlying demand and brand health are important factors to assess for any consumer company experiencing distress. This can be difficult to determine when revenue is volatile, but ultimately comes down to what the end customer, the mother, is buying. If the product is still in demand by mothers, supply issues can often be managed. All right, below is a table showing the results of major Chinese sales events over the last 24 months, the most recent in June 2021. So there are different events that you can especially in China, where you can measure how different brands are doing against each other. There's, especially on e-commerce platforms, the most recent of which I think is this one right here, is the 618 Shopping Festival. And you can see that A2 Milk is still doing about the same as it has historically, right? So below is a table showing the result of blah, blah, blah. As can be seen, the A2 Platinum brand has maintained a strong position despite disruption in its supply chain. So a lot of the things we've heard with the bear cases in this company is that A2 Milk is suffering from permanent decline. There's structural flaws with the company. There's decreasing birth rates and all of these kinds of things. But if you look at it over the past year or so, it's performing in these kinds of events relative to its competition about the same that it has, right? So while this data is indicative rather than conclusive evidence of brand health, it is a reassuring sign, right? So while consumer preference is one factor influencing demand, the size of the potential market is also a factor. This is something that I've been saying in a lot of my videos. A lot of people are talking about structural flaws, again, with the birth rates in China, right? Without, I think, considering what I think is likely to be more important, and that is the increase in the middle class in China. So although birth rates overall in China, yes, they're going to continue to decline, as do all developed economies, the middle class is going to increase. And with the kinds of structural distrust that we see in Chinese society for a lot of their own kinds of products, I think the demand for foreign products, especially infant formula kinds of products, where you really need to be sure that the quality of your product is safe for your child, is likely to keep increasing, right? Okay, I wanted to share this briefly. I'm not going to read through this whole article like the last one, but I think this is really important, and I wanted to explain why I think it is. So recently, we have seen some executive leadership team appointments in A2 Milk Company. Over the last year, a lot of the things that people were complaining about is the leadership in the company, and we're starting to see a change in that. The A2 Milk Company is pleased to announce the appointment of 2 new members to the executive leadership team following the recent resignation of Peter Nathan, Chief Executive, Asia Pacific. The Asia Pacific division, which comprises the vast majority of A2M's business, will be reorganized into 3 business units to provide more dedicated focus on its key components, being China's domestic business, international export business, and Australia and New Zealand domestic business. What this is showing is that David Bortoletti, the new CEO of the company, is likely understanding the deficiencies in the company as is working to correct them. What we saw with a lot of the flaws in this company was a misunderstanding of what the heck the actual business, who was purchasing the products from different locations in this vast Asia Pacific division, where those sales were coming from. So although it might appear that, or it did appear that a lot of sales were coming from the domestic New Zealand population and the domestic Australian population, it was actually not, a lot of those sales were not coming from those populations, but rather Chinese people who were traveling or were there for school or whatever, and then were sending those products back. And because there was such a lack of understanding and a lack of tracking in these kinds of channels, and maybe not to no fault of the A2M's company, but perhaps just a difficulty in overall kind of tracking these kinds of sales and who was buying them, there was a complete I think, misunderstanding of who where this business was coming from, right? And I think that what this represents is that there is likely a change, at least in understanding this, and likely addressing the core business, the core customer, which is largely Chinese, right? But there's been some changes. I encourage you guys to go and read this. I'm not going to read through the whole article. There's my understanding, and quote, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Recently, there's been some big players that have been introduced to the company. One of which I believe was from Bellamy's, who is a big provides some more outside dairy competence in this company, and from Nestle. And I don't know if it's from these executive appointments here. It could be, but but in any case, we're seeing a change in the company. All right. I also wanted to briefly address something I've noticed, at least from my comments and different sources on the internet. What I've noticed is that there's kind of, I guess, well, there may not just be two camps, but I've noticed that there's at least two extreme camps on at least the concept of A2 milk itself. There are people who are firm believers in the benefit of A2 milk itself, which I do not fall into, by the way. And there are people who are the opposite, who believe that the product is complete sham. It doesn't have any health benefit itself either, which I don't fall into either, by the way. What I've noticed is that I think that there's a misconception with what A2 milk really is and what really represents. If you are a normal milk consumer, in my opinion, okay, I'm not a scientist. I teach science, but I've not delved deeply into the dairy science of this product. If you're a normal milk consumer, in my belief, I don't think that there is any distinct advantage for drinking A2 milk over A1 milk. Okay. And this is well, I think that a lot of the misconception in this product lies. If you have no dairy intolerance and you can consume A1 protein, I don't think that you consuming A2 milk protein has an advantage for you. And I think that there's a lot of people out there who think that there is, and there's a lot of people out there who notice that these people think that there is and think that the whole thing is just BS, which I don't agree with, by the way, right? The advantage in A2 milk is that there are a lot of people who have dairy intolerance, who can consume the A2 milk variety of protein, but cannot consume the A1 variety of protein, right? So if you are an Asian person, which by the way, a lot of the customers, which we've noticed for A2 milk's products are Chinese. A lot of Chinese people have dairy intolerance. My stepmom is from Laos. In Laos, they are the lowest consumer of, I believe, of milk products in the world. And a lot of this has to do with dairy intolerance. Now, there's a lot of people who will say that this is from a lactose intolerance, but there's a misconception between lactose intolerance and just being able to consume different kinds of proteins. Let's say you consume A1 protein milk and you get sick. Well, a lot of people will assume that's from a general lactose intolerance. They say, okay, well, I'm a lactose intolerant. I can't drink milk. That may not be true, right? You may have a lactose intolerance, but it may just be you may have an A1 intolerance. You may be able to drink A2 milk with a belief that you are lactose intolerant when you're not really lactose intolerant, right? So I'm going to post a link. If you are interested in the science of A2 milk, and there is real science for this product, please check this out. I'll post this somewhere below. Okay, Australia. So historically, a large portion of A2 milk's business has come from Chinese immigrants or Chinese students, Chinese travelers who came to Australia purchased A2 milk infant formula and then sent it back to China. Now, over the past year, we have seen some of the strictest lockdowns in the world in Australia. There's pros and cons of that. I'm not going to get into that, and I certainly hope that we won't get into a political discussion in the comments, but I am looking for some feedback from you Australians out there. Do you guys think that this is going to continue? What point do you think Australian borders are going to open? I've read some articles out there that say that the borders will not open until deep into 2022, which is crazy to me to think about. Now, I live in Hawaii in the United States, and as far as my state goes, we have some of the strictest requirements for travel to this state, but it is nowhere near the levels of restriction that we see in Australia. Now, for example, I recently went to the mainland of the United States and then traveled back, and there is some to come back to Hawaii. You need either to have a vaccine and proof of that vaccine. You need to have a negative COVID test, or you need to go on quarantine for and it's monitored for a few weeks, right? So for either of these three things you need to happen, you can come to Hawaii, and that's very strict for the United States. In Australia, though, it is way stricter. You cannot go there, almost period, right? Even for some of the Australian citizens, they've been stuck abroad and unable to travel back to Australia. So, as a foreigner trying to make sense of this, I'd like to hear some of your guys' opinions and let us know in the comments. You know, when is this going to end? At what point can we expect some resumption of normalcy? Is there some kind of pushback? I've read that in articles on the internet, but I've also read articles that say that, you know, a lot of Australians approve of these kind of policies, which to me is kind of crazy to see. So appreciate any information you can give us on this. I wanted to talk a little bit about my position on A2. This is not investment advice. You can use what I think or what I'm doing to see if that makes sense for you, but ultimately it's your decision, not mine. But I wanted to talk a little bit about my position and think about that through the lens of this quote from Charlie Munger. The big money is not in the buying and the selling, but in the waiting. Now, a lot of the companies that I have purchased or recently sold, or a lot of them are cyclical. So there's points when I have to think about buying, and there's points when I have to think about selling profitably. This is not one of those. I don't think that A2M is one of those kinds of cyclical companies. When I first started purchasing or thinking about purchasing, the first video I made of A2 was, I believe, early April of this year. And I had a strategy where I had planned to, because I noticed that the company was in such a severe downtrend, there was such severe panic going on in the company, and these emotions I'm very familiar with in cyclical investing, by the way. Because I noticed that the share price was in such a severe downtrend, I decided to average into a position. So that meant, as I was putting in very small purchase orders for the company over several months. Now, recently, I've decided to cap that position. I'm no longer going to be purchasing this company because this company represents the amount of money that I'm willing to put into any position. And I started off thinking that I was going to put 5% of my portfolio in this company. But as my conviction grew with this investment idea, and as my cash pile increased from selling a lot of the cyclical stocks, when having such a large cash position, I decided to increase that allocation to this idea from a 5 to 10%. And for me, 10% in this represents a large position. Now, I know that a lot of people out there might think that's a little strange. I noticed that I've read a lot of people who have large sums of money invested in this company, and as much as 50, 75, or their total net worth invested in this company. And I would like to say that I think that that is a losing strategy long term for any company, for any position, no matter how convicted in that idea you are. You need to consider diversification. Yes, you could strike gold. You could be absolutely correct on that position, but there's a concept called variance, right? Even if you're correct in that position, but the market decides you are incorrect for a period of time, which, by the way, I think is likely what we've seen with this company, you can have some very significant losses. So I hope that that conveys something to you guys. Although I'm very convicted with this company, I'm not going to go larger than 10% of my portfolio on this. Now, what's crazy to think about is that when I first started purchasing this company, and over the first month or two, I was down as much as 20 or 25%. But because I had the conviction to keep purchasing shares, understanding the business, understanding what I thought were the changes taking place in that company, today I'm actually positive on this position. Although we are down today, but I haven't looked at my portfolio today. But a few days ago, I was up 5 or 6% overall on this position. So it's kind of crazy to think about the volatility you can see in investing sometimes, right? Now, back to this quote, right? With this position, now that it's capped, I'm not doing anything, right? Even though the share price is up 30% from some of the points I was purchasing at, I'm not doing anything. Nothing has structurally changed along the way on those purchases. Yes, there was a downgrade, but the company is still the same company. What I'm looking for is maybe we'll start to see some changes in August, but even then, maybe not. It may take a year, 2 years, 3 years. We don't know. Right? This, for me, represents a long-term position. And by the way, even though the stock is up 30%, that doesn't mean that downtrend wasn't correct either. That this might just be since that bottom could be a dead cat bounce. Sentiment might be changing, but sentiment could be wrong too. Maybe I'm absolutely wrong, and there actually is a structural flaw in this company. But that's why I'm only putting a 10% position in this, because even no matter how confident I am in a position, I can still absolutely be wrong. And with the conviction I have, could be right, but I'm also okay with going broke on this position. Now that I have a position I'm comfortable with, I'm willing to ride it out, and now I'm just going to be waiting. And whether that goes up or it goes down, anybody's guess. The next point I am excited to look out for is the annual shareholder meeting in August, where we will find out what has really been going on, if I am right or if I am wrong. Anyway, I hope this video was interesting or useful to you guys, and I'll see you guys soon.